Well, hello everybody, Justin Bell here on Life with Legends. There are fast racing drivers that make history and everybody knows their name. And there are fast racing drivers who are a part of racing history, but unless you're in the sport, you will probably never know their name. John Morton is one such guy. If you ever raced against John during his extremely successful career, you for sure will have seen his name written on the side of his car as he passed you. From shop boy at Carroll Shelby's race shop to driving with Ken Miles in a 427 Cobra for his former boss, John forged a reputation as a fast and reliable driver. That eventually got him hired for the BRE Datsun team, where he went on to win a ton of races. But the big-time sports car scene came calling in 1985 with Jim Busby Racing in a Porsche 962, which led to an amazing legacy of winning races for Nissan, including an overall win at the grueling Sebring 12 Hours. John is a quiet, polite and charming man who may have just been too nice for his own good, as my grandma would have said. Oh yes, and of course we raced together at Le Mans in a Viper, so I know how fast he is. I truly hope you learn more about this wonderful man and enjoy our conversation. Don't forget to head over to lifewithlegends.com and check out the portrait that I took of John, as well as catch up on past episodes of the show. Thank you as always for listening, and if you like it, please spread the word.
You know, I did a thing called Dinner with Racers.
Dinners with Racers, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're great.
And you start talking and you start saying things you never say because it's so relaxed.
Yeah.
And you think, oh shit, did I really say that?
Damn, was I supposed to talk about that? No, I mean, Ryan.
They try to bring it out. You know,
yeah.
Trying to bring the.
No, I think and what they've done, the people they've had on their shows, I mean, it's remarkable. They've done a great job.
Yeah.
Well, you said the good thing about being 80 is everyone says how good you look.
Yeah.
John, you look really good.
Well, thanks, you too, at 40 or whatever the hell
54
you
now.
54?
I know, it sneaks up on us.
It does.
Which meant that when we did Le Mans in 97,
yeah,
we raced the Viper together.
Right.
How old were you in 97?
I'd have to do the math.
Yeah.
42.
42.
Born in 42. 52, 62, 72, 82, 92. So 50, 97.
Wow.
Yeah, I was like 55, I guess.
I mean, that's not bad. How did that come about? Because I remember, because I was still really focusing on European racing. You know, I really didn't. I had done some American racing, and the whole team was based in France.
Yeah.
You know, did it come through Chrysler America?
Yeah, it came because as far back as the Datsuns in 1970, 71, the engine builder was one of our engine builders was John Caldwell, and he built the Viper engines for.
John. I remember John.
Second time I drove a Viper there was with you. The first time was a team called Kanaska Southwind, and that was the year before.
Okay.
And then just I guess through John and the Chrysler thing, and Neil Hanneman.
Yeah.
He was
like one of the project lead guys, wasn't he?
Yeah.
I don't remember much about it because I just remember that I remember that in 97 I won the championship for Dodge, for Chrysler.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. So by the end of the year, in that same car.
Because we didn't have the best car.
No.
We know we had the third
car.
We had the third car. Yeah. It was the others were Roush built, I think. Roush.
Yeah.
And this, I can't remember the details, but there were two different people that prepared these chassis.
Yeah. All I remember is that's kind of summed up the whole year. Was I wasn't supposed to win anything in that car. I was in through Chrysler UK, and I have a good relationship with you, Deshonat, now from Marika, and we talked about it a lot. I've talked about it a lot, but I was just a seat filler, really. You know what I mean? That third car was just, okay, we got the American guy, we need him in.
We're supposed to have an American.
Supposed to have an American, and we got the British guy because we're supposed to have him in. And we finished sixth. I guess, in class. I don't know how.
You know, I don't remember. I do remember one thing, and maybe you can clarify it. At night, there was some problem, and they found that there wasn't any oil in the rear end, and it took them.
There was something like that, wasn't
for
it?
a couple of hours.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember the details, but I thought, how can a team of this magnitude
make that mistake?
You know, how could the car run as long as it
Yeah.
had? Because it was night.
Yeah.
Well,
we'd already done a few hours.
Yeah.
No, but it was funny. I remember that was the first time, with due respect, I'd heard your name because I wasn't over here, and I was late 20s, and there you are at 55, as you say, and it's like, so who is this old guy? I mean, what is he? Who is this old guy? And then you came in, you were very fast, and I mean, it was a hell of an experience driving at Le Mans. But I guess that might have been the theme of your life, right? A little bit. Who is this guy?
You mean a filler? Yeah.
Because you come in and you've been fast.
I wasn't. There was a period where.
You were the guy at one point.
Yeah, and that was for 3 years.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the horsepower or the personality to go. I mean, I went beyond there, but very trickled. I trickled up to a higher level after that. But I had teammates like Bobby Allison and Posey and.
Sorry, 1 second. Something just happened. It's the trouble when you use a new machine. You're not really sure which is. Now that's working good. Just making sure those two are off. All right, no, we're good. That just made me very nervous that suddenly we were not doing what we needed to do. Sorry. Yeah. What was for you? What was that moment then? What were those years?
It was a series with a Datsun.
Yeah.
Japanese car that I hate it. I thought they're ugly little cars.
Yeah.
And I ended up getting to drive one and won a lot of races, and they got more and more beautiful. And
isn't it funny how winning can make you feel a whole lot better about a car? So
with the Z, we had 2 national championships in 70, 71, and then with the 510, the 2 Trans Am championships. And we were pretty unbeatable, and we raced against some, the last year with the 510, Brock put celebrities in the car to see if I could beat him, and I always beat him. One was Peter Gregg and Bobby Allison, Herschel McGriff, Sam Posey.
So they kept on throwing them at you, and you kept on beating them.
Well, it was publicity too for the team, but that was really the beginning of the Japanese car's performance image.
And I've got to say that when you look at those early days at that point, the fine line between being a professional and just doing it for fun, the line wasn't as defined as now, was it?
No. No. In fact, I had, it's been probably 12 years ago. We had dinner with Gurney.
Yeah.
And I said, what kind of money did you make when you went to Europe to drive for Ferrari, to drive the Formula One car at first? And he said, we got a ticket from California to Modena or wherever, and back. And I said you were flown to every race, and he said, no, we're just flown there and then back after the season, and and all your expenses. And he said, no, but we got the racers discount at the motel. And this is this is the Formula One team with Phil Hill and Allison and all the not Bobby Allison. The English Allison.
Yeah. I mean, that's crazy. And it's like Dad said he used to get a few £100 a Grand Prix at one point. But then when I spoke to Jackie Stewart.
He's the guy that changed the pay schedule.
Oh, yeah.
I think.
You mean Jackie Stewart?
Yeah.
I think he did.
Yeah.
He did. But Sterling Moss, I think, took a lot of money when no one else was making money.
Yeah.
But Jackie Stewart, I think, brought the
Yeah.
commercial sponsors in and
Yeah.
showed everyone how to do it. But over here, because SCCA and everything was so big,
Yeah.
and half the big races that you wanted to be in were run by then. So I imagine, how do you define it, right? Oh
Well, how do
I'm
you
racing-
turn from, Roger Penske and Jim Hall and Hanskin and the big teams? They ran amateur races.
Yeah.
They probably got paid under the table, but they had to run a whole series all the way, all throughout the country to win their whatever championship they're winning, whatever class.
Yeah.
And it was like the Can-Am or the Trans Am later.
Yeah.
But it was amateur.
Yeah.
So how do you make the switch? It helps to be rich.
Yeah, it did, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you've been up against that probably the whole life. I mean, we all do, right? Even in Formula One, they're up against it now. But
Yeah.
you've got guys with so much money.
Yeah.
But it was almost even more accessible they could buy a better car than you, couldn't they? And
Yeah. Well, my only hope back then was to get hired by somebody.
Yeah.
Because I bought Sylvia and I scraped up money to buy a 5,000 car.
Yeah.
And the series ended after we raced it one time.
No.
And then we had to turn it into a Can-Am car because it went to the single seat. And
Yeah.
we did that with our own money, and which was, by hook and crook.
Oh, yeah.
And we ran from 77 partial series, and ran 77, 78, 79, and then drove the Frisbee in 80, and the thing was a dynamite car, but it was still a 332 chassis.
yeah.
And then I got my first Le Mans ride was 1979, and I got a call from Ted Field, Ted
Yeah.
Interscope. And he said, I wondered if you'd like to drive with me and Milt Minter at Le Mans. He said, Danny's got a conflict with IndyCar testing or something.
Yeah.
And he said, I can't pay you much. I'm in a one-bedroom apartment.
But he still said the right words.
He said
he's going to pay you something.
No, he said, I can only pay you $2,000 in expenses. And I said, oh, okay.
That's so funny.
Okay, I'll do that. It
Yeah.
was like more money than I'd made in a year.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And anyway, that was the first time, and then a couple times with Canetti in a Ferrari.
What do you remember about going to Le Mans? Because everyone has their first impressions. Now, of course, it's still just as cool. I mean, Le Mans, but with the new grandstands and, swipe card entry and the paddock. I mean, the paddock, describe your first impressions of that. Because the garages, right, where the pit lane, it was...
There was gravel
Gravel.
right behind the guys, mechanics would walk behind the wall and just pee in the,
Yeah.
or whatever. And they had the most archaic bathroom facilities.
Awful.
And it was so embarrassing to ask sometimes a fairly pretty girl, can
Yeah.
I buy some toilet paper? And
I
they
know.
give you like 2 sheets
I know.
for a
a franc.
Yeah, Frank, yeah.
Yeah.
And I said, could I have a couple more? I mean, it was a whole different world.
Yeah.
It was, but when I was a kid, I had a game called Le Mans. It was a board game.
Yeah.
And you'd roll the dice and move your car. And,
Wow.
And I thought, man, and the other side was Monaco. I never did that, but I thought how cool it was to do what I did as a kid.
Yeah, and you're
on
there.
a game board.
Yeah.
And,
I think that's what's wonderful about Le Mans is that you're there and the French, it's such a massive French race. Everyone's sort of collaborating on being there. But at its heart, you're driving around the street, right? You're driving on the roads. It was so, for the majority of the track, there's a very, even now, a sophisticated side to it, and there's a very agricultural side to it.
Yeah.
Right? And it must have been hugely so then. I mean, out the back, no Mulsanne, no chicanes.
No chicanes.
Just
the first
frickin'
time
fast.
it was in a first time was with the Interscope 935, and I'd driven pretty fast cars.
Yeah.
Can-Am cars, the 5-liter but I thought you don't do that for 3 miles.
No.
Holy you have a feeling of vulnerability
Yeah.
that I'd never felt before, and with the 2-lane highway and the old song Hot Rod Lincoln, where the lines on the road look like dots.
Yeah.
That's the way it was.
Yeah.
But, after a couple laps, you think, well, I can rest here, kind of.
Yeah.
And, it was okay.
I mean, that's
I liked it better than the chicanes, really.
Yeah, I know. I never drove without them. They
Yeah.
came in the year before I first went there.
Yeah.
And, I mean, Dad used to say in the 917, he said it was the only chance, once you'd gone through the kink, you'd sort of tighten your belts, look at the gauges.
Yeah.
Just relax your shoulders and arms a little bit. And
Yeah.
once you got used to the track, it was...
Yeah, that kink, it wasn't even a turn
No.
with the chicane, but when there wasn't any and you approached at full speed and tried not to lift.
And especially if... And the odds are sometimes someone's going to be alongside you.
That's the worst part.
Was that awful?
The timing of getting
You
it
could see
right
them
then.
coming, or you were coming on them.
Yeah, either way, it's scary.
Yeah, no, I couldn't believe in the Viper when the first time I drove it there in the rain was how just crossing over the center line was like I thought about it for a lap, because the paint and the line would like jog the car.
Yeah.
And I was like, God, I can't even imagine
Yeah.
before they had chicanes. God.
They had a thing, one year, it was 1986, I drove with George Fulmer in a 956.
Yeah.
And we were on Goodyear tires. And it was a Yost team. And we had, this guy had rented the ride, but
Yeah.
it was the Yost team. And I'd go down the straight, and the car was doing this. And there's something really wrong with this thing. And I'd come in, and they'd check everything. There's nothing wrong. They can't find anything. So I go back out, and I see another 956, and it's doing the same thing. 220 miles an hour, this thing's going. And you just got used to it because it was the tire, something in the Goodyear construction that year.
Yeah.
And the cars would just, wiggle.
Move. Jumping around a bit, Dad and I drove the Lowenbrow car at the historic 24.
Yeah.
And they put Michelins on it. And Dad said, all the handling issues I ever had
They went away.
straight
Yeah.
away.
Yeah.
Tire technology and also Michelin's, the way they do stuff.
Yeah.
But the 956 era, you caught on, you did well with Hurley, didn't you? With Hurley Hayward?
That was in a Jaguar.
Or was it in the Jag?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That was later.
Oh, it was, all right.
Ran a 962 with Busby's team for 2 years. And we won Riverside, and we won it with Hurley, too, in the
That's
in the
what I saw.
Jaguar.
Yeah, I mean, that must have been, at least you can say you were part of that era because they were monstrous.
Yeah.
You had Can-Am back in the day, and then you had the Jags and the 956, 962s, didn't you?
Yeah, and then the Nissans.
And then the Nissans.
Yeah. The only part of that year, the 2 years, 85 and 6 with the Busby team that I didn't like, and I don't know if I should even say this, we were running what Goodrich wanted to call a street radial.
Okay.
And it was a big compromise to run that construction because of the tire construction had to be more radial than it really wanted to be at that time. And the tires would go off real quick. And we did win Riverside. We finished second at Sebring in 86 with that car, but we could have potentially won because the car that won was had trouble too.
Mm-hmm.
Darren Brassfield was driving with me, and he kept breaking the noses.
Oh, shit. Yeah.
And but anyway, it was still I loved Sebring. In 94, the first time I ever raced it was 64, when I was 20.
No way.
Yeah, I drove with Ken Miles in 64.
So,
in a Cobra.
yeah, I saw that. I read that. I mean, that was, so when you went and worked for Shelby in the shop, that was with the pure intention of trying to get yourself into a race car.
Well, yeah, I was trying to get my feet
Wet,
into racing, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd race karts.
What was that like being in that shop?
You know, thinking back on it, what a historic period that was.
Yeah.
But when you're doing history, you don't know you're doing history.
Yeah.
But it was the car I drove. I had college money left because I dropped out after 2 years because I wasn't going to be you had to be 21 to race, and I wasn't going to be going to college when I could be racing.
Yeah.
That was my fairly immature attitude at the time.
Must have totally pleased your parents.
So I took them. I called the 2 driving schools in England. I had my mother write the letters to the Cooper School, and they were out of business. And they suggested the Russell School, and I wrote the Russell School. They weren't here yet, and they never answered. Then I saw an ad for the Shelby School, and I instantly got come on out.
Okay.
And it was $1,000 to drive the school car and $500 if I drove my own car. Well, I didn't have a suitable car, but I drove to Riverside, and expecting to be taught how to drive by Carroll Shelby. I already knew how to drive, but I mean, and it ended up being Pete Brock.
Oh, did
it? He was a brand new guy. He hadn't raced much.
He wasn't
either.
Pete Brock when he was then, right? You know what I mean? As he was Pete Brock, but he wasn't the guy we know now as Pete Brock.
He was just a guy.
Yeah, just.
I mean,
guy.
he was he was a bright engineer, not engineer, but car stylist, and worked at GM for a while. And then he wanted to race, and he wanted to drive for Shelby. But he ended up getting to be the school teacher.
Yeah.
And the school car that I got was the Cobra, the first one ever made. And it was no Cobra had been in a car.
Is that the one Bruce Meyer owns now?
No, that's really not the first
No,
one.
you drove the mule, the test, the
prototype.
car. Whoa.
That was the school car.
I've seen that. Yeah.
Well, it was just they were done with the magazine stuff. So here, this guy needs a car to drive in the school, and so I drove it for the 5 days. It barely, it was really a piece of crap. Then it sold about 4 years ago for $13 million at Monterey.
Yeah. You could have probably bought it for 500.
Yeah. But anyway, I saw, during the school, Shelby came out to test the first car that was going to race, and that was with Billy Krause as the driver. And I was introduced to Shelby, and I asked for a job, and he said, "Come see me Monday."
Did he really?
So I became the janitor at Shelby American. But then I worked. That was '62. By '64, I raced with Ken Miles there, and we won the Road America 500. Won our class. We were second overall to Pabst and Hanscon in 250 LM Ferrari, and then ran again at Bridgehampton the next week.
How old was Ken then?
Well, it was about 45.
Okay.
44. Well, I think he was 47 when he died.
Yeah.
I think. And that was in '67, and this is '64. So,
how did you feel when you watched the Ford versus Ferrari movie?
They missed it so badly. Yeah. I mean, the idea of Shelby and Miles fighting on the front, rolling around in the grass fighting.
Yeah.
He wasn't like that. I mean, he had a prickly personality.
You mean Shelby?
No, I mean
Miles.
Miles. But they pictured him as this hostile guy that was just super nice to his son.
Yeah.
His son said that's not the way he was.
No.
And the guy that was really responsible, if this guy hadn't been there, Shelby would have been just a footnote in history.
Really?
As a driver.
Yeah.
As a manufacturer, it would have fizzled if Phil Remington hadn't been there. And the guy they had portray Phil Remington, not the guy, it was the way they portrayed him. He was like a car salesman.
Yeah.
And, I mean, that was as far from Remington as you could manage.
Yeah.
And then,
isn't it weird? It's kind of sad that in order to make a movie that the other 99% of people that will watch that,
Oh, they
have watched
loved it.
They loved it because it was the human side of racing, and
Yeah.
and then you look back on like McQueen doing Le Mans. He didn't want to sensationalize it, which meant the movie didn't do anything.
Didn't even have a story.
Didn't even have a story,
No.
and it was just too far the other way. I remember I had when Dad did the Porsche driving school all those years ago. We had a couple of Navy pilots come along, and they were on the school, and they had one had I don't know, they both had 911s, let's say, and they were talking at the little dinner we did, and they're saying, "Oh, did you do you like Days of Thunder?" I'm like, "Oh, no, I mean, you don't downshift on the banking."
Actually,
full
they
speed.
do now.
They do now. But back then, it was wide open. And when your crew chief tells you to go by on the outside, and they're like laughing, they said, "Well, we didn't know that. We just loved it." And then they said, "Did you like Top Gun?" And I go, "God, best movie ever made." And they said, "We don't put the flaps off and hit a stall at Mach 5. You know what I mean? The plane would disintegrate." I'm like, "Well, I didn't know that. It just made good TV, right?"
Yeah. No, I wondered how, the thing about the fighter pilots, they're, I mean, I don't know fighter pilots. I don't really personally know any fighter pilots, but I fly, and I know the ego of a pilot just because he can fly a plane, and to fly a jet fighter. I think they probably reveled in that movie because
I think they did.
It glorified what they do.
Oh, it made them, made them look very, very cool. It was, one of the things as I've been doing these and talking with everybody is, you guys had no clue whether you'd make a living at it. You just hoped you would. You didn't know how long it was going to be.
Yeah.
There weren't as many heroes, if you like. There may have been heroes, but there weren't as many role models as a career.
Yeah.
Who would have been the guy you looked at and went, "Ooh, I want a piece of that career"?
It was more that I idolized Phil Hill, Gurney, Sterling Moss, Mike Hawthorne. I don't know why. They just were the guys. And it was hard to get any information. I lived in Illinois near Chicago, and this is in the early 50s, mid 50s. And the information was so slow coming. You'd get a road and track or a car and driver, and 2 months after the race, you'd get a race report. But I don't know. There was just something magical about Sterling Moss and Gurney and Hill. Phil Hill first. Phil Hill came to Sebring, and he won 3 times, I think.
Yeah.
He came to Sebring in 1994 when I was driving the Nissan GTS car, and he said, "I said, when you were racing back in for Ferrari and winning Sebring multiple times, what kind of?" And then and became a Formula One driver for Ferrari. What kind of money? I'm not asking you how much did you get, but what roughly did you get? And he's figuring it in lira. And he said, my pay was about $1,800 a month. and he said, but when he won the world championship, all told, he got about $100,000.
Wow! In what year?
61.
And that was.
Yeah.
That was millions in today's world.
So
wow.
Later, that race in that car, we won overall in '94, and it was 30 years after I'd raced with Miles, and that was the first professional race I ever ran, was with him in '64 in the Cobra.
Yeah. Have you been to the Shelby Museum in Colorado?
Yeah. I got a driving suit there. The one I bought at Sebring.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was like a $15 suit.
I saw it there. I mean, what a place they put together.
Yeah.
But they showed me. Did they show you the Ken Miles, your car? There's a piece of it at the back.
Yeah.
And they showed it to me. And
you mean the one he crashed in? Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wasn't.
You never drove that car. No. Yeah. No, but he. He showed me. We were talking about the movie, and then he said that you should see this, and it's like the dashboard he has of the car, and
was it burned?
It was dented up a bit. It didn't look burned, but the trouble was is where he went.
He got thrown.
He got
out.
thrown from under that. So you know, so I don't know. When we do what we do, right? If you see any trace of that, it's pretty harrowing for a racing driver, X or otherwise.
And now it's probably safer than football.
Yeah.
And maybe an equivalent with I don't know, some sport that seemed safe. Racing is so safe now.
Yeah.
It doesn't. The reputation of being a crazy sport, super dangerous, is gone because of the safety stuff. But it also ruined the romance to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want anybody to get hurt. Certainly not killed, but to have the tracks as sterile as they are, in Europe especially, the Formula One tracks.
Like Austin is the example we have here.
That's a great track. But
wonderful. But you could spin 25 times and not hit a thing.
Yeah. It didn't. I mean, several times I went to Le Mans, somebody got killed.
Yeah.
And once it was in exactly the same car I was driving. I mean, the same, a 956. Joe Gartner, and he had won Sebring that year. And I'm out in the track, and I see the remains of the car, and we went under caution for 3 hours.
Did you have to keep driving around, seeing it every day?
Driving around for 3 hours while they repaired the guardrail. And I was so scared it was Jochen Mass, because it was there was nothing left to know what it was, except that it was a Porsche. And
the radio, they didn't tell you on the radio?
They didn't have radios.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
They can't exactly put a pit board out, can they?
They would get a signal at the what they call the Mulsanne hairpin, which is, and they'd get a signal, and no, they would. Let's see how to. I think what happened, you'd get a time as you passed the pit, past your timing, and they'd ring on the telephone. They'd call the signal pits, which was way the hell on the other side of the track, and say, he just did a 302 or a 30, and you get back, 3 miles, 2 miles later, 3 miles later, 4 miles later, you get a signboard.
Wow!
But there's it's just a phone.
Little phone. Everyone calling each.
Yeah, not a cell phone.
No,
it's just a phone.
Rotary phone going through.
Hooked up to the.
The danger side, people. I think you're right about the reputation racing had back in the day. My dad's day, your day. I mean, Formula 3, Dad lost. There were like 11 drivers died within a year and a half, and that's it. I mean, massive. If you hit a car, you look at them now. No wonder they died. Fuel tanks either side of you, just feet in front of the center line of the wheel.
Yeah.
I mean, they must just fold it up. Did you ever worry about that for yourself, or was it like a case of it's not going to happen to me because it's just not?
No, no. I'm totally not religious.
Yeah.
I'm totally not. And I'm not a believer at any level. But I used to, when I first started, I used to say a little prayer that everybody be okay. Yeah. And this is 1963.
Yeah.
And I'd say I want everybody to. I want to do well, but I can't. I can't say I want you to make me win my race.
Yeah.
God, because I don't deserve it any more than these other guys. Yeah. But now you get these guys thanking God and Jesus and
all the time
for letting them win a stock car race.
Yeah, and it kind of all seems a bit ridiculous.
Yeah, and it's absurd. But yeah, I did worry about it.
Yeah.
I don't really worry about it anymore, and I've had a couple of really nasty crashes, but it's a kind of a sliding scale. In the 50s, you knew you might die. And in the 60s, you were pretty much hoping you wouldn't. And likely you weren't, but very possibly you were. All the way up in the 70s were dangerous too, very dangerous. But as it's stopped being so dangerous.
Yeah.
And your mentality may have changed slightly as it went. If you were racing for that long, you really could feel you feel the difference in the safety. I remember I loaded 23 with a big gas tank on each side, fragile little car, big gas tank on each side. No fuel cells were even invented then, and it's pretty dangerous.
Who was the closest person to you that lost his life?
Jimmy Clark, and I never met him.
Oh, really?
I mean, it had such.
But your hero died, like Senna to a lot of other people.
Yeah.
When he died, everyone just went, if it can happen to him.
Yeah. No, it was crushing to me.
Yeah.
In fact, when I heard it on the news, I didn't want to believe it, and I said, I'm going to wait till the next newscast to see if it really, and it had.
Yeah.
And I remember going to work. I was working, making oil pans, and nobody else even, I heard this guy got killed. I mean, and it had such an impact on my life, and people I knew didn't know that, didn't care. I mean, not that they were uncaring, they didn't know who he was, or they'd heard his name, but that something really struck me about it. As far as personally, the two guys that meant and I can't say that we're really close friends, but I worked with them, and I knew them pretty well, were Dave McDonald and Miles.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the saddest things that I can hardly tell this story. I bought a Lotus 23, and Shelby painted it the Shelby color, which was the lighter blue at the time, and I entered it at it was entered at Mossport at the Player 200 with McDonald's Cooper and Miles in a Cobra, and my 23 are all in the semi. And I hitched a ride in the semi with a truck driver to go to the race, which was, and it was the week after Indianapolis, and we've got Miles' car and my car and McDonald's car, and we're listening with all this cool, because we can listen to the 500 and see how Dave does in a really crummy car, and he got killed on the second lap, and here we've got his car going to the next race.
Oh, John. Yeah, those are the moments. I've said that. I actually asked Dad about it. I experienced it with Paul Warwick, and I just started racing. I mean, Derek Warwick's son, and we were both sponsored by Camel, and he died in the 3000 race, and
Sports 2000,
Formula 3000, Formula 3000, the super fast cars at Alton Park, and
like a 5000.
Yeah, and I'm like, he was destined for Formula 1, and Jesus, 1 minute you're shaking and holding his hand, and the next is gone. And I remember going, well, like us all, we go, is that supposed to be what, that's not going to be me. I mean, it's not going to stop me. And I remember at the funeral, we were all at the funeral together, David Bradman, me, and all the drivers. And of course, you're just burdened by this, all your own internal thoughts.
Yeah.
And then see you next week.
Yeah.
Right?
I know. That's.
Off we go. I mean.
Yeah. Same thing.
Yeah. Sterling used to say that to me. He told me that. He said you just, you went and chatted to the birds, met some girls, you'd have a drink, and, he said...
Who said that?
Sterling used to say it when I asked him about it.
He met a lot of girls.
He met a lot of girls.
A lot of birds.
Yeah, a lot of birds.
Yeah, for a bald guy, he did well.
He did very well. As he said, if you're wearing a race suit, chap, in the bar after a race, it works very well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you ever meet him?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But, he was easy to talk to, but I was still, even when I had been racing professionally for 15 or 20 or 30 years, I still was intimidated by it. And, other guys that I did know were, I went out with Moss and had with Katie and had dinner.
Yeah.
And I never did that, but I always wanted to.
Yeah.
But I did get to, kind of meeting your heroes, and I was never disappointed in them, like Phil Hill and Gurney.
I only met
maybe Shelby a little bit.
Maybe Shelby. But he was definitely he was definitely a guy, wasn't he? I mean, he was definitely a hustler. I mean, that's that's the stuff. Many books and movies, I'm sure, could be made about it. But he was definitely a unique guy.
Yeah, he was, and I have tremendous respect for him. And I ended up, after the '64 season, I didn't get. I wanted to go to Europe and drive on the Ford team, but it didn't happen. And I coasted. I struggled for years after that before the Datsun stuff came up. Nickel and diming, running my own amateur car, and I always resented that Shelby. Not that he didn't take me there, but that he just basically fired me. A whole bunch of people, and it was because Ford had gotten pretty heavy footprint.
Yeah.
And so I used it as I felt a little hostile toward him.
Yeah.
And then for some reason, about mid-90s, I guess it was, I was asked to roast him at a dinner.
Whoa.
Along with Gurney, Brock, Danny Sullivan, 2 or 3 other, prominent people.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, why me? I haven't seen him in years. I didn't talk to him since I worked for him, and so I was so intimidated because it was like $100 a plate dinner or something, and I practiced. We were all up on the days and sitting there waiting for our turn to roast Shelby. And I had practiced my little thing I was going to say. I practiced it for a month, word for word. I didn't write any of it down. I just remembered it.
Yeah.
And I'm up there sitting next to Gurney, and he's taking notes like he's figuring out what he's going to say, and he's got to go do it in a couple of minutes. And I'm so scared anyway, and I knew exactly what I was supposed to say. And Brock was telling a dirty joke about him, and I mean, his roast, and then Sullivan he wasn't that close back then.
Yeah.
But
so what did you say?
What did I say?
Yeah.
I made up a thing. I don't know that he had to. I think it was his girlfriend or something that had dressed the whole crew in '64 at Sebring in '63 with Hollywood bibbed overalls.
Okay.
And they were falling down. And I roasted him on that and 2 or 3 other things and it was a hard roast. I mean, I really nailed him. But I didn't do it out of vengeance. I just did it because it's a roast. This is what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And
what a fun thing.
Lou Spencer was in the audience, who was a prominent Shelby employee and driver. And somebody said to him, "Oh, they got a professional up there, a professional comedian," and it was me.
No,
it worked so well, and that from that point on, we kind of were friends.
That's great.
And then I drove for him at Goodwood a couple times in Monterey.
Wow. So you meant when I came in, you were talking about planes. So
to a guy, a friend that. He stopped. He's my age exactly, and he quit flying because he thought he was getting a little slower on the assembly.
Yeah, obviously not you. Tell me about flying.
Well, no, me too, but I'm still doing it. Well, I always wanted to fly since I was a little kid, but not with the passion that I wanted to race.
Yeah.
And I didn't think of it as a professional. I just wanted to fly. And I didn't have the money and the time at the same time. And then I drove for Busby in '85 with Pete Halsmer. Do you know?
Yeah.
Pete?
Oh, yeah, I know Pete.
With Pete Halsmer. And the first time I drove on Busby's team was at Le Mans in '84, and we won our class, the C2 class. With Halsmer wasn't in the car. It was with John Osteen and a Japanese driver named Katayama. But we won, there were only 2 classes then, I think, C1 and C2, and we won the C2 in a Mazda-powered Lola. So then I ended up on the team with 962. It's a Goodrich team. This was a Goodrich sponsored program, and I wanted the job. I mean, I wanted to drive the 962s, and I was hired, and I didn't know there was such a thing as the Porsche Cup. You know what the Porsche Cup
Oh
is.
yeah.
I never heard. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't think it had anything to do with what we were doing. But Pete knew about it, and he said, "I want to be listed as the lead driver." And the reason was because I didn't know this, lead driver got twice the points that the co-driver got.
I've never heard that.
Yeah.
Wow.
I didn't know it either.
Wow.
And I didn't care. I didn't even know what the hell the Porsche Cup was. But we got to, we won Riverside, and then we always did pretty well. And then we got to Phoenix, and forget his name now, the guy that was the head of the Porsche competition over here, one of the...
He was so well known.
Yeah.
Okay, my brain's dead.
I can't think of it right now. I mean, this is before Holbert
Yeah.
and before Alvin. And he came, he said, "Well, you guys are doing great in the Porsche Cup. Pete's first, and you're sixth." There was something. I said, "Wait a minute. We're driving the same car. We both won the same race." And he's, "Oh, that's because the lead driver gets the points and the double points." And I didn't care. I mean, I didn't really care, but I thought, shit, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
So the end of the year, Pete finishes second in the Porsche Cup to Drake Olson, I think. And and I finished, I don't know, 10th or 12th. Yeah. And we go to Germany to get the awards. The trip to Germany, it was cool going through the Porsche factory, and then a dinner where we met Dr. Porsche and got a book or something. I can't. Yeah. And Pete gets his check for like $12,000, and I get a check for $2,000 or something. And Pete was a really good driver, and underrated probably, but so he felt guilty, and he flew. He'd been flying since he was a little kid. His father had an airport in Ohio, so he felt guilty. So he bought me flying lessons bought me the first 10 hours of flying lessons.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, with the money, with the dip, because he'd screwed me so bad. He didn't screw me really,
but the way it worked out.
It worked out, and I did it ever since.
God, a great way of getting around the country.
Yeah.
Isn't it? Good for you. I never wanted to do it, you see, because I've held, landed and taken off my friend's little Cessna before back in the day, but I'm just not. Nor is my father, although he did get his license, never used it. He flew solo. The Bells are not the most methodical people. You know what I mean? The skill of flying is not the problem.
I'm not that good at it.
It's the maintenance, and it's the worrying about the navigation. And if it was just crop dusting flying, I think in Australia I'd have signed up as a kid, right?
Yeah.
Because that looks fun.
Yeah, there's a technical side of it that I don't really care about. I don't like that. I just like flying the plane, but you have to do the other. I've flown to North Carolina, flown to Oshkosh, to Canada, to Mosport, I got away with a lot of stuff that I got a couple things I didn't get away with, but and racing. As they've made it safe, you can't do that with flying.
No.
You can make it a little, you're flying. I have a plane that was designed, virtually the same plane in 1936. And it's the pilot that's the plane isn't going to fall apart.
No,
it's not, it's just,
the pilot's got to be on top of it.
Yeah.
Do you watch racing now?
I watch NASCAR.
You watch NASCAR?
I watch NASCAR. I watch Formula One.
Yeah.
I don't watch sports cars much.
Really?
I watch the big races,
Yeah,
you know,
Daytona,
Daytona,
Sebring.
Sebring, Le Mans, but I don't know. It's because I'm not doing it myself. I just and I don't, you know, the names but you know, there's Sylvia just came out with a remake of a book she did in '83 called Dirt Tracks to Glory. It's an in-depth kind of an in-depth history of NASCAR told by the old drivers, and you know, the first time I was ever in a race in a car that really was considered a car, not a go-kart, was in college. And I'd been there for 2 weeks in college at Clemson in South Carolina, and I thought, I was so bored, and the college, the town was right across the street from the school, and then you're in the little heart of Clemson, which is nothing, and I come up on these guys, kind of dead end guys, you'd say, with driving these, and they got these old cars. One was a 39, a 40 Ford, no, a 37 Plymouth, and two 50 Fords.
Yeah.
And and they called themselves CARE, Clemson Auto Racing Enthusiasts. And they were nice guys. They were friendly, and I was a Yankee, so there was a little hostility there in the South. Probably still. Yeah, still. And I said, where do you guys race? And they said, we go to at Seneca, we're racing. I said, I'd like to see it. Well, you can go with us tonight. And I did. And they're racing with Dan, the guy that became a really good friend, is racing with a football helmet. Dressed like I am now, T-shirt. No. And I said, I want to do this. How do I get to do this? Because I'm not 21. He said, you don't have to be. They don't care how old you are here. They were my age, these guys. And he said, well, you have to have a car. Well, how do I get a car? He said, well, we'll go find you a car if you got any money. I checked out. I got all the money out of the little student bank that I had for movies and stuff. It was $43, and Dan and I headed for the used car lots and found a 1940 Ford that today would be worth several $1,000s, and they were asking $65 for it. This is 1961, and I said, I only have $43. He said, let me do the talking, because you're a Yankee. And he said, well, we got $43, and he said, okay, I'll take that. So I drive this 44. It ran, and I drove it back to school as fast as it'd go, which was probably a 75 or so.
Felt
had a
good,
flathead. It was a flathead, two-door sedan, and I parked it at their little where they worked on stuff and went to class. And when I got back, they'd already torched the fenders off. And
that's great. That's so cool.
And I raced it that next weekend.
Yeah. God.
So that was the first time I was ever in a real car that raced.
That's
and
fantastic.
We did it several times.
Wow. Can you pass me the green camera down there? The smaller camera. There's two on the chair. There's one that's smaller.
This one?
Yeah, please. Thanks. So I just take pictures sometimes as we're going. How did you? I always think when you look at a room of drivers, you know they're all in their own thoughts, especially in the drivers' meeting. And there's bravado. Some are more vivacious than others, right? Some are quieter. But they're all, with maturity, they're all thinking a lot of things. Am I good enough today? Is he good? How good is he?
Yeah.
Did you, how were you in that situation? How confident were you of yourself, of how good you were? I'm saying that because from my point of view, I didn't actually have much confidence most of the time. I was great when I was in the car, but out of the car, I just thought everyone was quicker than me. I wasn't.
I'm the same way.
Really?
Yeah. And in 1969 through 72.
Yeah.
After the very initial period
in
69 in a Datsun Roadster, and I started winning.
Yeah.
And then I got in the C production car, and that was that was like a professional class back then.
Yeah, yeah.
And I won. I won a lot, and I won 2 national championships in a row at Road Atlanta, and then the 510 was 71 and 72. The 510, I had the pole. We raced 19 times in those 2 years. That car, I won. I had the pole 16 of those 19,
Jeez. Wow.
and led every race I ever ran. And every day before the race, I don't think I'm going to win today, or
Really?
I think I might get beaten. And
You had no reason to think that.
no, I had reason to. That was the period of my life I should have had the most confidence.
Yeah.
And I still doubted.
Yourself.
Not so much my skill, but just the whole package.
Yeah.
And
Where do you think you rated? Because you won so much, and big teams put you alongside people that are more household names than you. Why do you think that was?
I think if I had to pick a tendency that I have, it's that I don't wreck cars much, and and I'm not hard on them. I don't know. But, and I was pretty fast.
You were fast. Yes, I'm saying you were fast.
But I never got, if I had to do it over again, I would have pursued Indianapolis racing.
I was going to ask you that if you could do it all over again, you would.
Yeah, because
you'd have been a good IndyCar driver.
I don't know. I did drive some.
Yeah.
I drove.
Of course you did.
I drove on bad teams or poor.
You finished ninth somewhere though, didn't you? You had a good result, I think.
Yeah, that's about where I'd finished, but I was in a. It was never on a good one. So it was on the Centerline Wheels car. The first race they had at the first IndyCar race at Long Beach, and I finished somewhere because I finished. I won the Probimi Pass Award. It used to be a Probimi Veal would issue this check to the people who'd passed the most cars, and I passed the most cars because all the ones I passed were stopped, already broken. But it was a pretty good check.
Yeah.
So I couldn't even gauge myself in that series because of the cars I was driving.
And of course, to make it an IndyCar is a life-changing, career-changing, financial-changing moment, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
you have to have money to get.
You have to have money to get
or you
there.
have to be a star. I mean, there were guys that emerged that weren't rich guys, like Drake Olson. Not Indy cars, it was sports cars, but a lot of guys made it with meager funds, I think.
And did you literally, I think I've asked everyone this question, who was the guy out on track, or you watched him, or he came by you, or you saw something in qualifying and you went, fuck, okay, even on my best day, I don't know if I could do that? Who was your guy like that you might have just thought, God, he was such a talent?
The guys at that level they're guys I really probably wasn't even racing against because they were the heroes that I had, like Clark and Gurney and Moss. So I never really.
So you never could see that.
I never. No, I beat some guys that I'm kind of surprised I beat.
Yeah.
But I was slower than some guys that I thought I should be faster than. And it's kind of a moving target. You think I wasn't that good here, so I need to get better.
Yeah.
I need to do something different. But as far as having a guy that was I was just in awe. The only one time I had that feeling zip through me, it was at a rain race at Road Atlanta in Formula 5000. And I'm in a Lola T400, which wasn't a good car. No. It was a mistake car. And it's raining like hell, and Andretti goes by in one of the Vels 332s, and I thought, holy shit, how do you do that in the rain?
Yeah, I bet. I know. So when you look back at your career, I mean, there you are, 80 years old. My dad's 80. Or there's a generation of you that really came through those woods, thankfully, touch wood, unscathed. You know, a lot of people didn't.
Yeah.
No real, other than getting into IndyCar, no real regrets on the choice of life.
No, not really. If I have a regret, I don't regret that I didn't race Indy cars. I wish I had,
Yeah.
but I don't know if I'd call it a regret.
Yeah.
Maybe it is. But, I think I got as far as I could get with the talent I had,
Yeah.
both physically driving talent and ability to promote, which was my very weakest
Yeah.
point. And there were guys that got farther than I did on personality. And I have a good I don't have
Yeah.
a shitty person.
No.
Can you say shit on
Yeah,
this thing?
yeah, you can say shit,
Okay.
whatever you want.
I had a good personality, but I didn't have an aggressive.
Yeah.
Asking people for money was repugnant to me. And I asked one guy for money. I asked a few people, but it became a good friend. But I was introduced to him, and Phil Conti.
Okay.
And I was trying to get some sponsorship for my own 5,000 car, and he said, well, I'd like to help you. He said, I'll write letters for you, but he said the most I could ever spend in racing is $5,000. And I'm thinking, I didn't say, well, thanks a lot, but I did. I said, well, okay, and wrote him off, and then I talked him into buying. Chipping in on my Frisbee because you had to pay to convert the car.
Yeah, yeah.
And he became half owner in the car, and then he called John Morton Racing, and then he said I want it to be my team, so he became Phil Conti. Became CGI Racing.
Okay.
That was his company.
Yeah.
And then he got it. We ran the Can-Am in '81, and then he bought a Lola T600 that I drove in the IMSA series, the GTP car. Yeah. And then he got a March, and I left to go to drive for Busby because things weren't. It didn't.
Yeah.
We're still good. We were good friends. It wasn't that. I just thought, I don't think much is gonna happen. And so I went to Busby's, and Phil did a turbo Buick. I did some testing on it, but factory
Yeah.
Lola thing. These are cars that are designed by the best designer in the world now.
Yeah, yeah. Totally.
Adrian Newey.
Yeah.
And we got the later March, and when I left, we had a March, and John Paul Jr. was we were co-drivers.
Yeah.
And then I left Phil to go to Busby, and Phil stayed and got the turbo Buick deal, and had Michael Andretti drove, and any number. John Paul drove, and never won anything, never won. And at the end of the deal, at $5,000 is the most he spent $1 million.
Oh my God!
Spent $1 million, probably lost a wife and a house.
It would have been so much easier to give you the money.
Yeah, and still loved racing. So that's what I did to this poor guy.
Oh my God!
That's a joke in a way, because he loved what he did, and he was a great guy. But I made him spend a hell of a lot of money.
Yeah. Oh, that is funny. Before we finish, you mentioned John Paul. I was thinking on my way here, John Paul Jr. For people listening. Obviously that's the last time I saw you was with him.
Yeah.
We were at his place.
Right.
It would have been great to have done this with him.
Yeah.
Right? Because I had 100 questions I never asked him.
Yeah.
And he probably had 100 things to say he never got to say. I remember when I was at the racing school and his dad turned up one time. He was out with Ken, on the slalom or something. And this little guy comes in, and I knew all about his dad, of course. But and all those stories and the legends, and suddenly this little wiry guy, heavy set, kind of smaller guy is in front of me and saying, "Is John Paul here?" And I said, "Yeah, he's out on the slalom." He said, "Will you tell him his dad's here? I'd like to see him." He hadn't seen him he just turned up. And JP turned a different...
Where was this?
This is Moroso.
Huh.
He just turned a different color. He didn't want to go in, didn't want to see him. Amazing, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, Sylvia did a whole book on him.
Yeah.
During the period where he, before he died, and stories that went way back. And
I need to read that. I haven't read that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she's got one. I'll give
Thank
you
you.
one.
I'd love to read it.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, you were a good friend of his.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were good friends when we raced together.
Yeah.
Primarily, and I didn't see him that much after that period until he was sick. But yeah.
Yeah.
No, he was a guy that I'm kind of glad I wasn't that kind of driver, because I wasn't. I couldn't.
No.
He had a gift, but the gift was so natural that he didn't even know where it came from.
Yeah.
I think Parnelli's the same way. He can't tell you what he does.
No.
Or he couldn't tell you how'd you win Indianapolis? Well, I watched him win Indianapolis, and well, I had a good car, and
I turned left and
I drove
won
with
it.
him at Daytona in a Mazda,
Did you?
24 hours with Parnelli and PJ, and I don't know, there was something about him that he was a good businessman too. So it wasn't that he wasn't a sophisticated, he didn't come from a sophisticated background, and he did really well.
You're talking about Parnelli, or John Paul, or Parnelli?
No, Parnelli.
Yeah.
But I don't think he could tell you how he did it.
No.
He could. Fulmer was a really good driver too,
Yeah.
and he could beat Fulmer.
Yeah. He could just do it, couldn't he?
He just could do it, and
But
he had something that just could do it.
Yeah, and I think when you know everything, and when I read up on him a lot, because I did one of these with him, maybe the last time he'll ever talk to anyone like this. And I was reading a lot of articles about him, just wanted to try and find out what kind of a driver he was, because I knew he couldn't tell me, unfortunately, as detailed as I wanted. And maybe you and I are more similar than like a John Paul or him, but certainly a Parnelli or any of those guys. They also had the ability to take it to the edge, to the mat. Like they could punch people out. They could do. Yeah. I've always cared too much.
I don't think John Paul
never hurt anyone. No, that's true.
His father did. On the grid once at Mid-Ohio. He punched Graham McRae, knocked him down because he was pushing his car, and Graham McRae wouldn't get out of the way onto the grid.
That's why John Paul was so different from his dad. Yeah, I know.
Completely.
Wow. When young people come up to you, young drivers, I mean, if you did if a young driver came up and they wanted to chat, and you're someone that they know of, and you've kind of been down that road. What advice do you have? Any sort of life advice you give young people, or what do you think you've learned at the end of this whole crazy run?
That's a good question, and I have a funny answer for it. I mean, a weird answer. I often have guys come up to me and say, I know you raced the Datsuns and you won this and you won that, but I have a Datsun too, and here's what I've done. I mean, they know who I am in relation to whatever car they're talking about, and then they tell you what they do. I went in a slalom and I was really doing well, and I went out to Willow Springs and I passed this guy. Yeah. That's kind of what happens. As far as a serious conversation about give me advice, I say, if they're a young guy, I'd say to do what I had to do to start is I bought my own car for $3,300, and I worked on it myself, and with some help, and I won several races. and I kind of moved up gradually, but that's not how it works anymore. You don't buy your own car and do that. You get a whole bunch of money and give it to some good team and win at a lower level and then win at the next level. And I said, if you can't do that, if you don't have access to money, maybe stock car racing where you could, and that even takes the money, but maybe another form of racing. But to make it in big time in road racing and start at the bottom, if that's all you've got the wherewithal to do, it would be, you couldn't do it today.
No.
What I had to do, and whatever, I'm not because I'm special, but what people had to do then, unless they happen to be an incredible talent that just bang, it just bursts onto the scene like Dave McDonald did. He was a drag racer, and he had a Corvette and tried it and could win races and always, had a weird sideways style and won at everything he did. The Times Grand Prix, the first time he just won stuff because he was like Parnelli.
Yeah.
Only he was a mechanic that worked on his own cars. So he was, he was like he was a mechanic at a Chevy dealership.
But, they're not the ones sometimes that make it to the history books, right?
He might not even have made it today.
No, maybe when. Well, thanks so much, John. That was great. God, I can't believe it's 25 years since we raced at Le Mans.
Was it? Yeah.
I mean, that's just horrifying. I'm now 54.
How old were you?
I was 20. I'm 50. So I was 30.
30. Yeah.
I was 30. But the same thing for me. I thought, you winning the championship for Chrysler, you're winning races, you think you're all the way,
Yeah.
So, well, thank you so much.